John Marshall and Scott versus Sanford. He was born on September 24th, 1755, in Fauquier County. He was the first of 15 children to be born to Thomas Marshall and Mary Randolph Keith. Thomas Marshall was a land surveyor. John Marshall, education. He was homeschooled by his father in his early life. He studied law by attending lectures at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. In 1780, he was admitted to the Virginia bar and began his own legal practice. In 1799, he was elected a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was appointed Secretary of State under President John Adams in 1800. Marbury v. Madison established the basis of judicial review. It was a lawsuit requesting that the Supreme Court issue a court order forcing Madison to give the commission to Marbury. Marshall, however, saw that Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional. Cohens v. Virginia. The Cohens sold a lottery ticket in Virginia and appealed conviction of having violated Virginia law. Marshall supported Virginia as conviction, permitting the state to fine the Cohens. It helps establish parameters for conflicting local and state laws. John Marshall, interesting facts. He built his law practice's success by defending clients against British creditors who attempted to collect debts prior to the American Revolution. His major influence was General George Washington, who was a friend of his father's. He joined the military at 20 years old. During this time, he was appointed lieutenant of the Army's 11th Regiment of Virginia, which achieved victory against the British Royal Army at the Battle of Great Bridge, which freed Virginia from British rule. He received many job offers under Washington and Adams, but always declined the opportunities. He was Chief Justice for 34 terms, and he delivered more than 1,000 decisions and penned more than 500 opinions. Dred Scott versus Sanford. Scott versus Sanford, who was involved? Dred Scott and John Sanford. Scott versus Sanford, when did the case happen? The legal case in which the U.S. Supreme Court took place on March 6, 1857. Scott versus Sanford, where did the case originate? The case originated by Dred Scott, who was an enslaved African American who had lived for a while in Illinois and in the Wisconsin Territory, both of which banned slavery. Scott sued for his freedom, arguing that since he had lived in a free state and a free territory, he was a free man. In 1854, a federal court found against Scott, ruling that he was still a slave. Scott's lawyers appealed to the Supreme Court, which heard arguments in 1856 and delivered its decision the following year. Scott versus Sanford, what happened in the case? Dred Scott was a slave in Missouri from 1833 to 1843. He resided in Illinois, a free state, and in an area of the Louisiana Territory where slavery was forbidden by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. After returning to Missouri, Scott sued unsuccessfully in the Missouri courts for his freedom, claiming that his residence in free territory made him a free man. Scott versus Sanford, why did your case go to the Supreme Court? The court argued that Scott's status as a citizen of a free state did not necessarily give him status as a U.S. citizen. While the states were free to create their own citizenship criteria and had done so before the Constitution even came into being, the Constitution gives Congress exclusive authority to define national citizenship. If Scott was deemed free under the laws of a state, he would still not qualify as an American citizen because he was black. The court asserted that, in general, U.S. citizens are only those who were members of the political community at the time of the Constitution's creation, along with those individual heirs and slaves were not part of this community. The court argued that in any case, Scott could not be defined as free by virtue of his residency in the Wisconsin Territory because Congress lacked the power to ban slavery in U.S. territory. Scott versus Sanford, what was the decision by the Supreme Court? The court ruled that no African American could be a citizen and that Dred Scott was still a slave. The court also ruled that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional.